I wanted to move on to the topic of today, which is taking responsibility for your spirituality. And I'd like to first consider why humans typically, and I would say like 95% of humans on the planet typically don't take responsibility for their spirituality. I mean, there are millions and millions of people who go to temple every week, you know. So that is a certain level of taking responsibility, but I'm talking about a step up from that. Temple, church, synagogue, whatever you call the place where people go. But this is an advanced path of spirituality, Vajrayana. It's also a fast path of enlightenment. And the analogy is, or the visualization is, you have the Himalayan mountains. And as they say in the East, it's very well accepted in the East, there are many roads to the top of the mountain. And they'll also say it's not necessarily important to pick the right road. It's simply pick a road that you feel is going to lead you to the top of the mountain, and then devote yourself to that path. And then what a fast path is compared to the vast majority of paths out there, a fast path is directly up the mountain. Most paths do the switchbacks. And you all have been, according to Vajrayana, you all have about 20,000 past lives to even be at the point of soul development where you'd be even interested in a class like this, particularly with the amount of energy we're dealing with in this class. And you've been doing this for a very long time. We're talking lifetimes. So this is one lifetime. This is another. It's another. At some point, 20,000 lifetimes ago, you may have learned, oh, when I kill someone, that makes me suffer. Even though I thought getting revenge was going to help me, it actually creates more suffering for me. So you stop killing, say 20,000 lifetimes ago. That's being very optimistic. It may have been more like 10,000 lifetimes ago. And then eventually you learn selfless giving. That's a big one. And so you started realizing that when I don't hoard, but when I open in terms of time, energy, and money and resources, giving rice to your neighbor because they're starving. Maybe that was one of your past lives when you realized, oh, that actually felt really good. There was something big about that, something bigger than the survival game that most humans are playing on the planet. And so you started doing more of that. So those are the switchback lifetimes. In Vajrayana, you're like getting pretty close to the top, and it's time to take 100% responsibility. It's not about going to a place of worship to be seen by friends and other families. Oh, they're such a nice family. They're always at church every weekend. There's a lot of image that happens in those situations. It's honestly, it's spiritual vanity is what that is. It's like, oh, didn't the so-and-sos, like, didn't the Johnsons look so nice as a family at church yesterday? Like there's a lot of that. And it's not necessarily bad at all. It's just, that's the level of consciousness that the people who are congregating are at, and that's fine. Taking responsibility for your spirituality is actually very simple. Spirituality is really simple, and they'll try to make it really complex. There's so many different types of spirituality out there, and trust me, I went to UC Berkeley, and I was in the spiritual milieu of Berkeley, California, and they got it all, from fairies to Tibetan Buddhism to every sect of Christianity to, I mean, and I even dabbled. I went to a lot of these things and so on. But what it comes down to is you don't need 10,000 paths, and there are at least 10,000 paths. All you need is one path that helps you connect with your spirit. And yet 95% of the people on the planet, at least, it's probably more than that, do that almost not at all. Not on the level that we can do here in this class together. So why would that be? Well, it's because the ego is a very tricky thing. And if you're human, you have an ego. And the ego was brought up in survival over millennia. Goes back to probably caveman days. It's very much an evolutionary tool. If you read the book called Why Buddhism is True, written by an evolutionary psychologist, he'll explain how the ego was created as a survival mechanism from early humanity. And it's all about getting something you need to survive or getting away something else, getting away from something that's going to kill you, bear, lion, whatever. So it's all about attraction and repulsion. And Buddhism talks about attraction and repulsion, and it talks about survival. And the vast majority of humans, they can talk about abundance all they want. And I've heard many people talk about abundance. Doesn't mean they're practicing that every moment of every day. They're still struggling with the ego. And so in this attraction and repulsion, and that really this is a core principle in Buddhism, is to go beyond attraction and repulsion and come into equanimity, beyond the pushes and pulls of the universe, beyond the pushes and pulls really of your own mind, your ego. So how do we do that? Well, it begins and ends with meditation daily. And in the earlier practice, like in the beginner and intermediate paths, at least, you're probably dealing with a decent amount of pushes and pulls in your mind, as you're trying to meditate. Attraction and repulsion. Oh, what am I going to have for dinner later? Ooh, oh yeah, I want that, or God, I can't do this job anymore. I'm sick of it. I got to get away from that job. Repulsion. The lion is now your boss. In modern time, it's no longer a lion. It might be your own boss that your mind is trying to run from. And so we're just doing our best to let go of both of those states of mind and come into center over and over and over again. This is mental practice. This is mental push-ups. We're actually going to make our mind stronger and hone it such that it is sharp for enlightenment. Enlightenment exists beyond the opposites. It exists beyond, attraction and repulsion. It is a state of equanimity. If you study the enlightened saints of any culture, of any religion or non-religion, they don't necessarily have to be religious to be enlightened. Then you see that they still might cry if they lose a loved one, for example. But they're not going to lose their connection with the eternal truth of who they are. No matter what tragedy befalls them, they are still 100% connected to the eternal within. That is really the defining factor. So that's why I say spirituality is way simpler than a lot of people are making it. And I'm not doubting that you can go out and learn how to see fairies. I mean, that is a thing. And maybe that could be helpful. But really, if you're really looking for true happiness, like the point is with seeing fairies is you might learn something from the fairies, you might learn something from the unicorns. I had an amazing dream where I was flying with these giant gold eagles, and when I woke up from the dream, I knew that was a real dimension that I was flying. I wasn't flying with them. We were rolling around in the grass. The eagles were just like loving, just like putting their wings on the grass. It was a beautiful dream. They were such magical beings. And so these dimensions are real. And I really felt that. It wasn't just something my mind made up. And there was a higher vibration feeling, because I think that was a higher dimension beyond planet Earth, actually, where there's less suffering. And in the end, that's not, any experience is not going to create lifelong happiness. Knowing your own true spirit with any experience could do that. But it's really not about the experience itself. For example, it's like, oh, I need to be a mother because I love holding babies, because every time I hold a baby, then I feel enlightened. And what a Buddhist mystic of it, worth their salt would tell you is, that's wonderful. The baby is opening your heart chakra. But hey, newsflash, that's your heart chakra. Learn to meditate on your heart chakra. You could open that with or without a baby anytime. So the same with mystical and high experiences. The power is already within you. You don't have to seek outside yourself at all. And the Buddha said it best. He said, neti neti, and I believe that's in the Pali language, not Sanskrit, because the Buddha was really he was actually quite blasphemous for the day. Like, he went against religious order big time. There were at least a couple different times when people were trying to kill him because he threatened the religious order of the day. They wanted to teach in Sanskrit because they want to have power over the common people. And Buddha's like, F that. I'm teaching the untouchables, which you don't want me to teach. That was like the low caste of the time, not allowed to get the spiritual teachings. And I'm teaching women. Brahmins did not like that. Very strange, because women are very spiritual beings naturally. Like, why wouldn't we offer that to everyone? And he wanted to teach him Pali, and he did. He spoke in the common tongue of anyone could understand that common tongue. Brahmins had turned spirituality into spiritual self-importance, spiritual egotism, which is the worst kind of egotism because it's the hardest one to see. He wears the robes, he talks the talk, he talks all peaceful and all. That has nothing to do with real spirituality. Are you deeply connected with the eternal within? That's the only measure. And obviously, if you're separating people in the way they were not spiritually connected with their own true self, because if they were, they would see there's no difference between them and the person in the low caste, and there's no difference between male and female on the deepest levels of who we really are as beings. And there's certainly no difference, like by language, like what language you speak. So silly to create those separations. Only the ego does that. So the Buddha in Pali language said neti neti, and it means not this, not this. And there's a beautiful Buddhist statue out there. You'll see a little Buddha, you'll see the Buddha sitting in lotus position on the floor, and like in meditation style, and he's pointing. And there's this ring around him. It's usually made of brass, and they have this brass ring, and it represents the ring of the world, the ring of experience. It represents the world itself. It also represents the subtle physical body, the energy body. It includes elves and magical beings. It includes everything, physical, mom, dad, everything and everyone that can be experienced. And the Buddha is pointing outside that circle, and he's saying, not this, not this. And so the teaching is that if you seek truth with a capital T, like beyond any capital T truth they taught you in philosophy class in college, like they don't, it's quite limited, honestly, what you learn in philosophy university, in philosophy at university. So if you're really like the ultimate truth, which is beyond words, which is way beyond thought, has nothing to do with thought, actually, then neti neti is something to stick with for a lifetime. Every time you see your ego sticking to a thing of spirituality, just remind yourself that this thing is actually empty. The only thing that gives it fullness for spirituality is my intent. So I might even have a statue of a fairy on my altar, and I might bow to the fairy with heartfulness, and after a meditation, and just thank them for being, because there is a beautiful dimension there, no doubt. And yet, not this, not this. When it's time to dissolve the ego completely into the light of eternity, then the fairy is really just an extension of my own mind, and I just have to let that go too. And all reality, everything that humans call real, is actually an extension of their own mind. The only thing in Vajrayana Buddhism, or all forms of Buddhism, I think I can say, the only thing real, considered real, is that which does not change. Fairies change, humans change, rivers change, earth changes, planets change, galaxies, universes, multiverses, they all change. So none of that's real, and it's actually considered an extension of your own mind. The fact that you are a perceiver makes these things real.